Thank you all very much for being here. I want to thank Campaign for America's Future and all of the other organizations that have made this event possible. Let me begin by stating that I find it rather appalling that a Wall Street billionaire, Pete Peterson, a man who has more money than he could spend in 100 lifetimes, is hosting a conference today that called for massive cuts in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and many other programs that millions of middle-income families desperately depend upon. Billionaires like Mr. Peterson and others should not be using their wealth and their power to beat up on people in this country who are trying to survive. I find that morally grotesque.
Mr. President.
Let's also be very clear. The United States has today the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth, and the gap between the very rich and everybody else is growing wider and wider. In America today, the wealthiest 400 people own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million Americans. The top 1% alone, Mr. Peterson and his friends, own over 40% of the wealth in this country. In contrast, if you can believe it, the bottom 60% of Americans, the people who will be hurt terribly by the proposals coming out of this conference, they own 1% of the wealth of America. So if we want to move to a deficit reduction, maybe the time is now to ask Mr. Peterson and his billionaire friends to start paying their fair share of taxes rather than devastating middle-income and working families. And the situation is getting worse in terms of income and wealth disparity. All of you should know that in the last study that we have seen in 2010, and I want you all to hear this, 93% of all new income between 2000 and 2010 and 2009 went to the top 1%. And 7% of all new income was shared by everybody else. And these people here have the gall to tell low-income seniors and working-class families that they have got to take cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and then they go around and tell us that the rich need more tax breaks. That is absurd. That is morally indefensible. Now let us also not forget that the federal deficit, which I am concerned about, which you are concerned about, was caused by two wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, which George Bush forgot to pay for. The federal deficit was caused by tax breaks for billionaires like Mr. Peterson and people all over this country who never needed those tax breaks. And one of the major reasons that we're in a deficit today is because of the Wall Street caused recession, which resulted in business decline and unemployment all over America, meaning less revenue coming into federal coffers, which today are at the lowest point, less than 15% of GDP that we have seen in over 50 years. Point being, yeah, we have got to deal with the deficit, but don't do it on the backs of the weak and the vulnerable.
Woo!
Now let me just say a word about Social Security. And let me be very loud and clear on this. Despite what you'll hear on television tonight, despite what you'll be hearing from people at this conference today, despite what virtually every Republican is saying and despite what some Democrats are saying. Social Security is not going broke. If you want to know the truth, you don't have to trust me. Just go to the recent report by the Social Security trustees. And this is what you'll find. Social Security has a $2.7 trillion surplus. Social Security can pay out 100% of all promised benefits for the next 21 years, at which time it will pay out 75% of all benefits if Congress does nothing. Should we fix Social Security and make it solvent for the next 75 years? Yes, we should. And the way to do that is very simple. Right now, billionaires like Mr. Peterson pay into the Social Security Trust Fund the same amount of money as somebody making $110,000 a year. And if we lift that cap starting at $250,000, which by the way is the proposal that Barack Obama brought forth when he was running for president, if you just do that, ask Mr. Peterson and his friends to start contributing more to Social Security, Social Security will be solvent for the next 75 years. So let me conclude by simply saying this. All over this country, you saw this in France, you saw it in Germany, you saw it in Greece, and you're seeing it in America. What the people are saying is, yeah, if we need austerity, let it not be austerity on the backs of the most vulnerable people in our country. Let us not have austerity on the backs of the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor. Let's have some austerity for Mr. Peterson and the other billionaires. And if we ask the wealthy and large corporations to start paying their fair share of taxes, if we take a hard look at military spending, which in this country now is more than the rest of the world combined, we can deal with our deficit crisis, but do it in a way that is fair for ordinary Americans. So I just want to thank all of you for being here today, and it is my pleasure now to introduce Roger Hickey, who with his organization have done just a great job for so many years. Roger.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. He's just about said it all. I want to welcome you all to the Andrew Mellon Auditorium. It's named after Herbert Hoover's Secretary of the Treasury, who counseled Hoover against growing the economy, against stimulus for jobs, and for cutting the deficit in the midst of the Great Depression, and it made it worse. He was one of the wealthiest men of his time. Pete Peterson is one of the wealthiest men of our time. And I'm here to say the American people, by and large, by huge majorities, disagree with what they are saying in there, that deficits are the biggest problem. These folks in here don't know what it's like to be unemployed. They don't know what it's like to see your wages shrink. And these folks in here are imposing austerity. They claim that they're in favor, occasionally, of some kind of stimulus to grow the economy, that you can damage the economy if you cut too fast. But have you ever heard them agreeing with President Obama that we need to invest in infrastructure jobs? Have you? Have you ever heard them say that we need to aid the states and the localities who are cutting cops and teachers' jobs? No. They are here to create a plan to foist upon the American people after the election. And it's one reason that we have got to go out and win that election and win it big, so that these people will not have the power to impose Simpson Bowles and the cuts to Social Security and Medicare and other programs that they want to impose in a lame duck session. We have a plan. Pete Peterson often says that we don't have an economic plan to deal with the deficit. And I'm here to tell you that we have a plan. We're going to be talking about it at our summit, June 18th, 19th, and 20th here in Washington. It starts with grow the economy and create jobs. That's the way you bring down the deficit. We roll back the Bush tax cuts. Is that something we could do?
Yeah.
We cut military spending. And over the long term, we need to take on the healthcare system, not the Medicare system, and make our healthcare system as efficient as those in Europe and other countries that spend half of what we spend on healthcare. If we did that, we would not have a deficit problem, and we would have full employment. That's our plan. That's what we're talking about at our summit in June, and that's what we're taking to the American people. So thank you all for being here. Come to our alternative summit in June.
Roger, thank you very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Maya Rockeymoore, who leads the Global Policy Solutions, a Washington, D.C.-based policy firm that works to create and advance social change strategies worldwide. Maya.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. I have a question. What do G. Peterson, Bill Clinton, and Jamie Dimon all have in common?
Lots of money.
A whole heck of a lot of money. Of course, Pete Peterson is a member of the Billionaire Boys Club, and Bill Clinton and Jamie Dimon want to become members of that club. They're already millionaires. Yet these Wall Street and Washington titans also all endorse something called the Simpson-Bowles Plan. This is a plan that even the commission that was convened to develop it rejected. Yet they think that it's a plan that is appropriate for the American people. Americans from all walks of life should be wary of anyone, whether they be Democrat or Republican, red or blue state, black, white, or brown, who claims that Simpson-Bowles is good for the American public and is good for the U.S. economy. In fact, the opposite is true. Simpson-Bowles supporters seek to impose European-style austerity measures on the American people. These are measures that will harm middle and working class Americans of all backgrounds. People like the officers who are actually defending us today, and the cameramen who are actually taking pictures of us today. Working and middle class Americans, while giving wealthy individuals and corporations another pass in the form of tax privileges. The last thing our struggling economy needs is more tax privileges for the wealthy, paid for on the backs of the middle and working class Americans. We don't need it, we don't want it. No thank you, Mr. Peterson. No thank you, Mr. Clinton. No thank you, Jamie Dimon. I want to sound a special alarm for the next generation, since those in there are falsely claiming the mantle of fiscal responsibility in the name of the next generation of Americans, our children. Our children, who will be inheriting the cost of poor fiscal decisions and poorly designed policies from the last 14 years. Our children, who are the products of a recession generation of parents who have lost homes to foreclosures and vital financial security due to massive unemployment. Our children, from who the cost of education is getting steeper, even as the quality of that education declines. Our children, who by the year 2019 will be a majority black and brown, and who hail from households that have the highest poverty rates and possess the least amount of wealth in this nation. These are the children who have not benefited from the decisions of the last 14 years. They didn't benefit from the Bush tax cuts, they didn't benefit from the wars abroad, and they are not well positioned to shoulder the costs of these poor decisions in the future. Yet Simpson-Bowles supporters seek to stick it to our children by making them pay for subsidies for today's wealthiest corporations and individuals, in part by seeking to decrease the value of vital social insurance programs that they will so desperately need once they reach maturity. Shame on them. Shame on them.
Shame on them.
Ladies and gentlemen, the United States of America is better than that. We can and should do better for our children. We must resist anyone, and I don't care how much money they have, I don't care how much wealth and power they have. We must resist anyone who seeks to impose unfair fiscal policies that privilege the pockets of some over the progress of the nation. We cannot let the forces of darkness prevail over America's dawn. Now, for those who say that we need to do something, we do. And I invite you to visit www.modernizeSocialSecurity.org to learn how we can strengthen Social Security for America's future children and for Americans of all backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maya. Our next speaker is Max Richtman. Max is the president and CEO of one of the great senior organizations in America, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Max?
Thank you very much, Senator Sanders. I'm so proud to be here today with you, Senator, and our other speakers to expose the myths and misinformation being sold in this building today. You know, I was hoping we would be out here in the rain, but what I'm really worried about is that America's seniors and middle class will be left out in the cold if Pete Peterson and his allies convince the Congress, convince our politicians that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid have to be cut in order to save them. That doesn't make any sense. Unfortunately, too many of our politicians already believe this. What's happening here today is a cynical attempt to try to convince the American public that we've got just two choices to fix Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Number one, cut these programs. Number two, refer to choice number one. That's not a real choice. Middle-class Americans have paid all their working lives for these programs. They're struggling with skyrocketing healthcare costs, diminished home values, depleted savings. It's no wonder that they feel abandoned when politicians try to undermine these important programs. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Poll after poll that we've done, survey after survey that we've done, town hall meetings across the country, it's clear the American public is with us on saving these programs. So if most Americans support Social Security and Medicare, who's opposed to them? They're inside this building. They're right inside this building. Millionaires whose tax loopholes would be paid for by cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Wall Street bankers who would reap a windfall of commissions if Social Security is turned into risky private accounts. And insurance companies who would make billions more if the Medicare program is privatized. The evidence could not be clearer. From what we've learned throughout our poll, our talk town hall meetings, our surveys, the American people stand with us, people you're hearing from this afternoon. They don't stand with Pete Peterson, with Wall Street bankers, with millionaires, with the insurance companies. They are standing with us. So to the elected officials inside this building, to all of them, I want to make it clear that for the sake of the American people, distance yourself from the propaganda that's being perpetuated and spread inside this building. Distance yourself. Stand up for the middle class. Stand up for seniors. Fight for them. Fight for seniors. Fight for the middle class. Protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Talk about major cuts, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It impacts everybody. It impacts women even more than men. And I'm very delighted now to introduce you the president of the National Organization of Women, Terry O'Neill. Terry?
Thank you, Senator, and welcome welcome everybody, and thank you for everyone coming here. Yeah, the kinds of cuts that are being contemplated in this room indeed have a disproportionate impact on women. Cuts to Social Security, that is exactly what the Simpson-Bowles plan would entail, cuts in Social Security. But women are disproportionately reliant on Social Security. Why? Because women cluster in jobs that don't provide pensions, don't provide health insurance, don't even provide 401ks. And when you work a lifetime at unequal pay, without retirement security, and having to pay out of pocket for your current health care costs, how are you going to save for your retirement? Where's your retirement security going to come from? Social Security. It's the answer. Woo! I have a challenge for the very wealthy people that are in this room today. There's a lot of people in there. They're well respected. They're really rich. They're knowledgeable. They're really rich. They're powerful. And they're really, really rich. I have a challenge for them. Let's start telling the people of this country the truth for a change about our economic situation. Let's tell the American people the truth that Social Security is not only not broke, is not in crisis, has a surplus, and can be made to have a surplus for 75 years very easily. Here's how you do it. Number one, scrap the cap.
Yeah!
It is not okay that someone making $1 million a year pays 0.0-something% in payroll taxes, where the rest of us pay 6% in payroll taxes. Take off that cap and let's have the millionaires pay their fair share into the Social Security system.
Yeah!
Number two, let's get a full employment economy going, folks. At 4% unemployment, you'll have more payroll taxes going into the Social Security system. This ain't rocket science. You don't have to be smart and well-respected and knowledgeable to figure that out. You can strengthen the Social Security system simply by reducing unemployment. Number three, let's start tackling unequal incomes and inequality right away. It is not okay that CEOs are currently paid some 360 times what workers are paid in this country. That is not acceptable. Raise the minimum wage to $10 or more, and you will immediately see a stronger Social Security system. Let's tell the truth to the American people.
Yeah!
Now that we know how to strengthen Social Security and really make it robust, let's figure out how we can take benefits into the 21st century. Right? The first thing we need to do is understand that families have changed since the 1930s. Right? We have a very different profile as families in this country. Today, women are either the full support of their families or an essential support of their families. That's the majority of women in this country today. We need a Social Security system that recognizes their role as both breadwinners and caregivers in this country. Today, many women, although their income is essential to their families, they have to go part-time or drop out of the workforce altogether to care for children or to care for elderly family members. We say we want a caregiver credit that will allow for women to have good Social Security benefits even when they drop out sometime during their work life.
Yeah!
We need to have a special minimum benefit for those workers who are unwillingly long-term part-time workers, and this is disproportionately women of color experience this. We want a special minimum benefit for those who work part-time and a special minimum benefit for those who've been low income for many, many years. The minimum wage has not been raised in over 10 years in this country, and Social Security needs to be part of the solution so that when women get to the end of their working life, they are not further disadvantaged by a poor retirement income because they got poor wages while they were working. Thank you all very much for being here, and let's give a message to these guys. One last message I have. Any politician, Democrat or Republican, who votes to cut Social Security as the Simpson-Bowles plan does, will pay a price at the polls, and all of us assembled here will make sure that that's true. Thank you.
I want to thank Roger and Maya and Max and Terry for their wonderful, wonderful comments. And let me just conclude by saying this, and I think all the other speakers have said it better. Number one, we are dealing with a profound moral issue. Millionaires and billionaires should not be working to devastate the lives of middle-income and working families. That is morally objectionable. And second of all, instead of talking about cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, we should be talking not only about strengthening those programs, we should be talking about investing in our economy and ending the disgraceful high unemployment rates that we have right now.
Yes.
God only knows there is enough work to do, rebuilding our infrastructure, transforming our energy system, making sure our kids get the best quality education we can provide. That should be the future of America, not cuts in programs that people desperately need. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bernie.